Hi, I'm Dr. J. Franklin Shults, registered psychotherapist here in the state of Colorado, also law enforcement chaplain, pastoral counselor, and retired long-term police officer and educator. One of the things that I've had a great interest in over the course of my career is talking about stress. We have lots of attention being paid to issues of PTSD and trauma and critical incident debriefing, police suicide, emotional survival, and all those kinds of things. But sometimes we relegate the issue of stress over to the side as an emotional issue. Here's what I would like to see. I would like to see stress being understood as a wholeness health issue. Stress is not just a feeling, it's not just an emotion, it is a set of physiological, body chemistry, biological phenomenon that we need to understand as being a survival issue, not an emotional issue. It's not just about emotional well-being. It's about how we perform our job as first responders when we're out there in between calls and at calls. So ideally, what I would like to see is that stress management, and I wish we had a better term for it because that's already been colored as, that's for people that can't handle stress, not me. But I wish that we would understand the holistic effect of distress and overstress on our performance so that it could be the fifth main training pillar for basic training in our rookie academies and for ongoing training and continuing ed throughout an individual's career. We obviously need to have a good grasp of constitutional and statutory law. We have to have a good grasp of how to drive because that really kills more police officers than anything, at least in the short term during career on duty. We need to know how to shoot well and maneuver and have good tactics. And we also need to have a great deal of skill in arrest control and defensive tactics. So those four are the training pillars that we have today. And I really would like to see the profession move to having that fifth integrated pillar being dealing with stress as a tactical issue, not an emotional issue. Stress is a tactical issue, not an emotional issue. So let's talk about stress. Stress is a set of chemicals put in place by the body in response to a threat. That threat can be real or it can be perceived. If you're walking down the street and somebody comes at you with a baseball bat and you see it, you're going to have a stress response. The little part of your primitive brain is going to say danger, danger, and that's going to throw your body into a new physical condition that's designed to enhance your ability to deal with that physical threat by fighting it, by fleeing it, or perhaps by freezing, deer in the headlights, playing possum, survival mode. So that perception of threat, it activates the fight or flight or freeze set of body chemistry. The F3 response is what I call it as an abbreviation. So if you've got somebody sneaking up from behind you with a baseball bat and you don't know about it, the threat is there, but the threat response is not going to be there. However, if you're walking along in the dark and it's in a neighborhood where you maybe have been beaten before, and you think that there's somebody coming up behind you with a baseball bat, even though it might just be some leaves skittering along the sidewalk, your brain is going to perceive that you're under threat and is going to respond appropriately with all the biochemicals associated with the fight, flight, or freeze response. So it's always about perception. Another thing that we need to understand about stress is that perception can come through any of the five senses, but it can also come from any other image or memory that the mind's eye sees. So when we see somebody with a baseball bat, coming at us in what we perceive to be an aggressive manner. We're going to have that biological F3 response. If we are watching a scary movie and in the movie somebody jumps out suddenly with a loud chainsaw, we're going to have a very similar F3 response, even though that's completely imaginary, because the brain for that moment doesn't know the difference. If we had a very sad event, let's say we went to the funeral of a friend or loved one say 2 years ago, and for some reason we began thinking about that friend and that funeral, and some of that grief comes back and that sadness comes back. There may be a tear that rolls down our cheek, and we may still have that same constriction in our body that comes over us when we have grief and sadness. And it's from a memory. The reality is that we've spent the last couple of years coping with it, and now here it is, and we're re-experiencing it from the image of a memory. And so we need to understand that when we are experiencing some degree of that F3 body chemistry, it may be for something that is real, something that is perceived, or something that is replaying in our head from something that's real or perceived. Now, the problem which causes post-traumatic trauma issues, and to the extent that it can sometimes be disabling or interfere with our life, is that we have basically 3 parts of our brain. And I'm going to make this very simple, not because I think you're simple, but because I'm simple. And that is the lizard brain, which is our primitive part of our brain tucked up into a safe place underneath the center of our couple of pounds of butter consistency brain matter that we have protected by our skull. And then there's the frontal part of our brain, which is the logic brain. That's the other L. So we have the linking brain, we have the lizard brain and the logic brain, and kind of in the middle. And again, I'm being very general and very very simple. In the middle of the brain that connects the logic brain with the lizard brain, we have this linking brain. And in that linking brain is all of our memories. It's where emotions are stored as connected to memories. It's all of our experiences. It's some routine pathways. And we like to think that we're always processing information up here in this logic brain, making logical decisions, always doing a balancing, what makes sense, what are the alternatives. But the reality is that most of the time our brain coasts because we're getting literally millions of pieces of information through our 5 senses. And if we really had to stop and process every piece of information that comes into our brain, we wouldn't have time to make a step or to turn on our blinker. So lots of stuff that we do just comes from habitual pathways that are already made in our brain. Let's take, for example, we drive to work. We drive to work the same way every day. And if you get to your destination after you've left home, and try to think back to what you experienced on the drive there, if you've done that 100 times or 500 times, you're not going to have any memory of that. And one of the telling things about that is, let's say all of a sudden there's a new stop sign, or there used to be a stop sign and the city decided to take that stop sign out. Guess what? How many times are you going to go ahead and stop at that non-existent stop sign because you're kind of on autopilot? And that's a great thing. That's why we train so hard. We want certain decisions to leap directly from this lizard brain, from this automatic pilot kind of brain. We want that to automatically happen. So many times, if you're like me, for example, as a police officer, you found that your gun is out and you don't remember processing the thought, oh, this is a situation where I might have to use deadly force, so I'm going to withdraw my weapon and I'm going to keep it at the ready, and I'm going to index with my finger outside. We don't usually go through that process. A lot of times we just feel like the weapon has leapt into our hands. And of course, in very traumatic events, officer-involved shootings, we often hear, and the research shows, that officers will say, well, I heard this sound and somebody shot, and then I later found out it was me, or I didn't even know I had the gun in my hand, or these kind of perceptual distortions. So there's a lot of automatic stuff that happens, and there's a lot of automatic stuff that we want to happen, and we train for that to happen, and that's why we do so much training and try to do what we call muscle memory. The thing about stress, or that stress, that F3 chemistry, is that it's very functional. It does a great job for us. But here is what the problem is. There's two problems with stress. One is if there's a truly life-threatening event. We faced life and death. And sometimes that can even be a threat to our ego, an existential threat, a threat to who we are. So a divorce or losing your job can be a traumatic event because it assaults our sense of who we are, our sense of identity, our sense of security. But we typically think about it as a traffic crash or a near-death experience or a combat experience where we're just kind of overwhelmed with this, oh my gosh, I could have died type of thing. Well, so that's one extreme. And what happens with that extreme is that lizard brain says, okay, I'm never going to let that happen to you again. Never again will that happen to you. So in order to keep that from happening to you, everything that might possibly be associated with that traumatic event, every smell, every sound, whether it's the sound of a weapon, the smell of gunpowder, if the shooting happened in a bakery, the smell of a cinnamon roll, any taste, any visual stimulus, it happened on a bright sunny day when there were clouds on the horizon. Your lizard brain is saying anything that reminds me of that time when your whole existence was threatened, I'm going to use that as a warning flag. And so what that means is that those warning flags are going up all the time, triggering the F3 response, or they come off at seemingly random times where this part of the brain is not aware that smell of that cinnamon roll is telling this part of the brain, get ready to live and survive. And so we get confused that we have these random, apparently random times of anxiety and distress. And it's just this, your survival part of the brain doing what it's supposed to do, and the rest part of the brain is just kind of not involved. Because that lizard brain and the chemicals that it can bring forth, that F3 chemistry, has the authority. It has the authority inside your body to act without filtering through the logic brain. It has the authority to hijack your whole system and make you do things. Now, we know that the things associated with that F3 chemistry are designed to help you survive for about 60 seconds or a couple, 3-5 minutes. So what that means is that because that lizard brain can hijack your whole body and make you prepared to live for the next 60 seconds, it shuts down and sucks away anything devoted to long-term living. So the food that you're digesting, the lizard brain's saying, I don't even know if you're going to live for the next 20 minutes to use the food that you digest, so we're going to shut that down. So all the blood and all the chemistry, all of it, but a significant part of it is taken away. Your digestive system shuts down. By the way, is it any surprise then that we have constipation, or we have diarrhea, or we have upset stomach, or we have ulcers that are a result of stress? And I know ulcers are caused by bacteria, but the question is, does stress cause the bacteria? There's where the link is. So what else is that lizard brain going to do? It's going to make your eyes open wide so that you can see, but it's going to create tunnel vision so you can zero in on that potential threat. Your smaller muscles are going to lose dexterity because primitive man wasn't used to trying to acquire a target with this little bitty trigger and this little death device that we carry in our hands. It was designed for big movements, for big punches, for running, for leaping, for rolling. So the energy goes away from the small muscle groups and into the large muscle groups. You're going to see facial changes. You may get flushed. You may turn pale because your blood is being directed to the large muscle groups to do that fight or flight kind of thing. Your blood chemistry changes. It's going to clot faster. Your ability to feel pain is going to go down. That's going to be numbed. Many of you have had the experience in a fight or a crash or involved in sports, where you get injured and you don't know it until later. Well, your body's just protecting you from being disabled in the middle of the fight. Which is, by the way, if you're involved in a shooting, every officer involved in a shooting ought to be taken to the ER to examine two things. One is, did they get wounded in a way that they haven't become aware of yet because of that F3 response? And number two is that F3 response becomes so overwhelming that there's a huge blood pressure or heart rate change that may constitute a threat to long-term safety. So, we sometimes don't talk about that. We've gotten so concerned about preserving the evidence and preserving the emotional integrity of a person post-shooting that we forget that we need to take them to the hospital in 100% of the cases and get them checked out at ER. So there's that tremendous kind of change. Now we begin to understand why somebody in a PTSD, somebody who's been stuck in that F3 mode, has so many health problems. They have relationship problems. They have existential problems. They have depression. They have high alert. All those kinds of things are because the body is stuck in that on position, and it's taking resources away from homeostasis. That's the steady state. That's the normal state of things where you have dexterity and you have your digestive process going on, and you have your blood cells are fighting off infection, those kinds of things. You have good blood flow. All that gets changed in the F3 response. Well, why do I feel stressed if there's no big F3 thing going on right now? Well, because there are constant low levels of stress. And so you may not have this big adrenaline rush, which, by the way, we're designed for. We're designed to get that big scare and then go into action or run away and do what we do. And then in the process of responding to that threat, we use up that F3 chemistry so that when the threat is gone, we can go back to normal and we can start building our bodies up to respond to the next threat, hopefully days or weeks away. But for police officers in particular, we're constantly aware of threats, and so we're getting little bits of, we got a constant F3 pump that's going. And you can get that because, again, we don't have to experience, we just have to perceive it. So if you're listening to the radio and you're listening to all these other calls, and you're listening to a pursuit that's 2 miles away, you'll never be involved in it. You're listening to a shots fired call way out of your sector, you're not going to go to it. You're still experiencing that F3. You go home and you think about it. You go home and you're concerned about whether you're going to get shot on your doorstep, and all these condition yellow, we're always supposed to be in condition yellow, you should never be in condition white. Well, that'll help you survive, but ironically it's going to kill you in the long term. It's going to shorten your life or shorten the quality of life. So you're getting these constant pumping of that F3 chemistry into your body, but you don't have an outlet. When you have that big stress moment and you have the chemistry that floods your body to deal with it, and then you deal with it and move on, one of two things happens. Either in the fighting or fleeing, you burn up and burn off that F3 chemistry, or you have a downtime after the high threat event, and internal chemistry provides kind of an antidote to wash out that F3 chemistry. So exercise, physical activity, fighting, fleeing will get rid of that, burn off that chemistry, or just time will let it drain because we have some natural antidote chemistry that's available to help flush that out of the body. The problem with that constant pumping low-level F3 response is that we don't go to an incident where we're burning that off, and so it stays in the system. And there's such a constant supply of it that the antidote chemistry, which we don't have an endless supply of, we can deplete that. We almost never complete our F3. chemistry. So the F3 chemistry is going and continues to flood. I'll put that up as a matter of respect, but I want to continue the presentation. The F3 chemistry continues, and our antidote chemistry just gets washed out and done with. So we continue to feel stress. And again, even though the body is not like in full F3 mode, it's in partial F3 mode. So we still have problems associated with resources being taken away from our normal life activity. So our sexual desire may go down, our risk-taking behavior may increase, our relationships, our connections go down, our emotions are blunted, we're constantly jumpy and skittish because we have hyper-alertness, and our blood pressure is high, and we have that blood chemistry change in a constant flux, and it doesn't get back to normal. So that's why chronic low levels of stress have a deleterious effect on our physical health and our emotional well-being and our relational well-being, our energy level, and virtually every other aspect. Now, in summary, I don't want us to say that stress is always bad. We're built to have stress. Stress can be motivating. It can be exciting. It can add interest to our lives. It helps us get out of bed in the morning because there are things that we need to do, and we feel a little pressure and stress to do that. So we're designed to have some stress. We're just not designed to handle well a huge stressful event that we never really process and allow ourselves to truly get back to normal, and that's when we have PTSD type symptomology or an actual PTSD diagnosis. Or we have this constant low level of stress that we never really deal with. We don't really understand where this stress is coming from because it's not like we're having some big crisis all the time. We just have this constant dis-ease and distress that gets manifest in ways that we don't necessarily trace back to that stress chemistry. And so, in summary, if you're having sleep disturbances, relationship issues, sexual performance issues, risk-taking, alcohol and other drug abuse, if you have the suicidal thoughts, long-term depression, just a feeling of lack of motivation, lack of energy, all of those things could be signs of some other type of physical illness or other type of brain illness that may be going on, but they may very well be attributed to some unmanaged and unattended stress. The good news is there are ways to deal with that. We're going to talk about some of them in some other videos, but the main thing is to recognize that maybe that's the source of you not feeling 100% in your life and work, and we want you to feel 100% of the time. That's the ideal. Thanks for joining me. Email me, give me a call, text me if you have any questions. Thanks for listening.